She stumbled into the most dangerous office in Chicago with blood on her ankle, rain in her hair, and a secret encrypted on her laptop that powerful men were willing to kill for. He was Jinwoo Kang, the Shadow King, feared by every criminal organization from the South Side docks to the Gold Coast boardrooms. He had ended careers with a single phone call and ended lives with a single word. He had never once canceled a meeting for anyone. Until her. Until he saw the bruises. If you want to find out what happened next, stay until the very end. Hit that like button right now and drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Let's begin. Well, the rain came down hard that Tuesday morning, the kind of rain that didn't care where you needed to be or how fast you were trying to get there. It fell in thick sheets across Michigan Avenue, flooding the gutters, hammering the awnings of closed storefronts, turning the sidewalks into shallow rivers that swallowed the ankles of anyone unlucky enough to be out in it. Nia Brooks was out in it. She had been running for 6 blocks. Not jogging, not power walking. Running. The desperate, graceless sprint of someone who had already calculated exactly how late she was and understood the full weight of what that meant. Her blazer was soaked through. Her natural hair, carefully pressed that morning at 5:30 a.m. with the kind of focused ritual that only someone who needed armor before facing the world would understand, had absorbed the rain and expanded into something wild and uncontrollable. One of her heels had caught a crack in the sidewalk on Wacker Drive, and she had stumbled hard enough to scrape her palm against a concrete planter, leaving a raw pink streak across the base of her thumb. She hadn't stopped. She couldn't afford to stop. Kang Tower rose ahead of her through the curtain of rain. 47 floors of black glass and brushed steel, the kind of building that didn't invite you in so much as permit your entry. The lobby lights burned white and cold behind the glass facade, clean and remote as the surface of a frozen lake. The revolving door at the center of the entrance was flanked by 2 men in dark suits who stood without moving despite the weather, their earpieces visible, their eyes tracking everything on the street with the practiced stillness of people who had been trained to notice threats before threats noticed them. Nia had worked at Kang Global Industries for 19 days. She had been late twice before, both times by under 4 minutes, both times accompanied by written apologies left on the desk of Mr. Kang's previous executive secretary, a cold and precise Korean woman named Hae-won, who had transferred to the Hong Kong office 3 weeks prior and left behind nothing but a color-coded organizational binder and the quiet implication that her replacement would fail within a month. 45 minutes. She was 45 minutes late. She hit the revolving door at speed, pushed through, and nearly collided with the security desk on the far side of the lobby. One of the guards, a large man named Terrence, who had spoken exactly 11 words to her across her entire tenure at the company, caught her by the elbow before she went down. "Ms. Brooks?" His voice was flat. "Careful." "I know," she said, already moving toward the elevator bank. I know. Mr. Kang arrived at 6:40. She had arrived at 6:59. The meeting he had been scheduled to attend, a preliminary negotiation session with the Daejin Infrastructure Consortium, a deal worth $370 million and 2 years of back-channel maneuvering, had been scheduled to begin at 8 a.m. sharp. It was 8:47. The elevator opened on the 39th floor, and Nia stepped out into the executive wing, where the carpet was charcoal gray and thick enough to muffle footsteps entirely, and the walls were lined with framed architectural drawings of buildings Kang Global had either purchased or developed, or both. The air up here always smelled faintly of cedar and something metallic she had never been able to identify, something that reminded her, absurdly, of the inside of a gun case, though she had never actually been near a gun case in her life. She knew she looked terrible. She had caught her reflection in the elevator door on the way up. Soaked blazer, ruined hair, mascara that had made a slow dark migration down both cheekbones. And she had stood there for 3 full seconds just absorbing the full catastrophe of her appearance before deciding that there was nothing she could do about it now except walk forward and absorb whatever was coming. She was good at absorbing what was coming. She had been doing it her whole life. Jisoo Park, the junior communications coordinator who sat at the outer desk near the elevator, looked up when Nia appeared. His expression did something complicated, a flash of what might have been sympathy immediately suppressed by professional neutrality. He's in the main office, Jisoo said quietly. The Daejin team left at 8:30. They were not pleased. Is he? He hasn't called down to building security to have your access badge deactivated yet, Jisoo said carefully, which was the closest thing to reassurance he was apparently willing to offer. Nia squared her shoulders, pushed a wet strand of hair back from her face, and walked to the main office door. She knocked once. Come in. 2 words. No inflection. The voice of a man who had stopped being surprised by things years ago. She pushed the door open. Jinwoo Kang was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window that occupied the entire north wall of his office, his back to the room, his hands clasped behind him. He was 36 years old, lean and precise in the way of someone who moved through the world with deliberate economy. Nothing wasted, nothing soft. He wore a black suit without a tie, the collar of his white shirt open at the throat, and the only concession to informality he ever permitted himself during working hours. His dark hair was cut close at the sides. A small scar ran from the outer corner of his left eye toward his cheekbone, 3 centimeters, pale and old, the origin of which no one in the company had ever been told, and no one with functioning survival instincts had ever asked about. He did not turn around. Mr. Kang! She stopped in the center of the room. Rain dripped from her blazer hem onto the carpet. She watched it spread in a small dark circle and felt something cold move through her stomach. I am so sorry. My train was delayed at Fullerton, and I didn't have enough data left on my phone to call ahead. And I know that's not an excuse. I know that this is the 3rd time, and I understand completely if you need to. How did you hurt your ankle? She stopped. He still hadn't turned around. I'm sorry? Your ankle. He turned then, slowly, and looked at her directly. His eyes were dark and very still, the kind of eyes that didn't move around a room the way most people's did, tracking and assessing and discarding. They simply settled on whatever they were pointed at and stayed there. Right now, they were pointed at her. You're favoring your left side. You've been doing it since you walked in. Nia looked down. She hadn't realized. She had been so focused on moving forward, on getting here, on managing the controlled collapse of her morning, that she had stopped feeling the pain somewhere on the run-down Michigan Avenue the way you stopped feeling cold when you were cold enough. She felt it now. Her left ankle was swollen above the line of her shoe. The pain arrived in a slow, dull throb that pulsed with her heartbeat, and she understood suddenly that it had been doing this for some time. It's nothing. I tripped on the way in. The sidewalk. Sit down. Mr. Kang, really, I can... Ms. Brooks. His voice didn't rise. It didn't sharpen. It simply landed with a weight that made argument feel physically exhausting. Sit down. She sat. He crossed to his desk, pressed the intercom, and said 2 words in Korean that she didn't understand. Then he moved to the small credenza along the east wall, opened the bottom drawer, and removed a first aid kit. White plastic, red cross on the lid, the kind of thing that felt incongruous in a room like this, in an office like this, in the company of a man like this. He crouched in front of her chair. Give me your foot. Mr. Kang, this is completely unnecessary. I can... Your ankle. He looked up at her. Now. She gave him her foot. He removed her shoe with the efficient, impersonal movements of someone who had dealt with injuries before. Not the tentative handling of someone squeamish about it, but the practiced grip of someone who knew what damaged tissue felt like under his hands, and was simply assessing the situation. He ran his thumb along the outside of her ankle, pressed lightly at the swelling, watched her face when she winced. Not broken, he said. Sprained, possibly a partial ligament tear. He opened the first aid kit, removed an instant cold pack, cracked it, and pressed it against her ankle. Hold this. She held it. He was still crouching there, and she was acutely aware of the ridiculousness of the tableau. The most powerful and feared businessman in Chicago, kneeling on his own carpet, tending to the ankle of his perpetually late executive secretary who was dripping rainwater onto his furniture. When he looked up and saw it, his hand had pushed the hem of her wet slack slightly upward to better position the cold pack. The skin of her lower calf was visible, and on that skin, dark against her deep brown complexion, were 4 bruises arranged in a pattern that no one who had ever seen that pattern before could mistake. Fingerprints. Someone had grabbed her there hard enough to bruise. 4 fingers on the outside, and when Jinwoo's eyes moved to the inside of her leg, the thumbprint was there too, darker than the rest, pressed deep into the soft flesh above her ankle. He didn't move for a moment. Then, very carefully, he set down the cold pack, stood, and walked back to his desk. He sat down. He looked at her across the width of the room with that absolutely still, absolutely level gaze. "Tell me what happened this morning," he said. "I told you. I tripped on the Ms. Brooks." Something in his voice had changed. Not louder, not harder, just different. The way the sky changes before a storm, not during it. "I have been running operations in this city for 11 years. I know what a fall looks like on someone's body, and I know what a hand looks like. Those bruises are not from a fall." He paused. "Tell me what happened this morning." The room was very quiet. Outside, the rain continued to fall against the glass, steady and indifferent. Nia looked at her hands in her lap, at the scrape on her palm, still raw, still stinging. She thought about the things she had been telling herself since 6:15 this morning, the narrative she had been constructing as she ran, the version of events she had planned to carry through the day and the week and however long it took to feel like something she could put down. She was so tired. She was 29 years old and she was so tired of carrying things. "His name is Marcus Reed," she said finally. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "He was my boyfriend. We broke up 4 months ago. He comes around sometimes, outside my building." Jinwoo said nothing. He waited. "This morning he was there when I came out," she said. He wasn't just there to talk. He was with someone, a man I've never seen before. And he told me that he needed something from my laptop, something from work." She looked up. "He said he needed access to the internal document archive, specifically the Q3 infrastructure contracts and the Daejin preliminary filing." Something shifted in Jinwoo's expression. Not much, a fraction, but she had been watching his face carefully enough to catch it. "He said if I gave him access, he'd leave me alone." She pushed on because stopping felt worse than continuing. "I told him no. I told him I didn't have that kind of access, which isn't even... I do have that access. I have almost full archive clearance, but I wasn't going to..." She stopped. "He grabbed me. He and the other man tried to get me into a car. I bit him. I kicked out, and I hit something, and I ran." The silence that followed was the kind that had weight to it. "The man with him," Jinwoo said. "Describe him." "Korean. 40s, maybe. Short hair, gray at the temples. He had a tattoo on the back of his left hand. It looked like a mountain or a wave. I couldn't tell." Jinwoo was quiet for 3 full seconds. "Where is your laptop right now?" "In my bag." She reached for the laptop bag on her shoulder, which she had somehow carried through all of it. The attack, the run, the train, the 6 blocks in the rain, and set it on the chair beside her. "It's here. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know if I should go to the police or come in or..." "You came here." "I didn't know what else to do." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he pressed the intercom again and spoke in Korean. More words this time. A longer sequence, clipped and precise. "A doctor will be here within 15 minutes, he said. "You will not leave this building today. You will not contact Marcus Reed or respond to any communication from him." She blinked. "Mr. Kang, I appreciate that, but I think I should maybe go to the police." "The police." He said it the way someone might say the weather, a fact neither good nor bad, simply present. "Ms. Brooks, the man who was with Marcus Reed this morning works for an organization called the Han Cartel. They have been attempting to infiltrate Kang Global's internal network for approximately 8 months. The tattoo you described is a Han family mark." He paused. "If you go to the police today, you will be filing a report in a department that has at least 3 officers on the Han Cartel's payroll. Your statement will be on their desks within 4 hours. You will be significantly less safe than you are right now." She stared at him. "I know that's a great deal to absorb," he said, and his voice carried something she hadn't heard in it before. Not warmth exactly, but a kind of careful precision that felt, unexpectedly, like consideration. "A great deal," she repeated. Yeah. The doctor arrived in 12 minutes. His name was Dr. Yoon, and he had the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to being called to places without explanation and asking no questions he wasn't expected to answer. He examined Nia's ankle, confirmed the sprain, taped it with professional speed, produced a compression sleeve from his bag, and left without having said more than 30 words total. Through all of it, Jinwoo sat at his desk and worked, or appeared to work. Nia had the persistent and uncomfortable sense that he was not actually reading whatever was on his screen, that his attention was directed elsewhere, processing something she couldn't see. When Dr. Yoon was gone, she sat in the chair with her laptop bag in her lap, and her freshly taped ankle elevated on the footstool Jinwoo had produced from somewhere without comment, and she looked around the office, really looked at it for the first time, because the previous 19 days had been too focused on not making mistakes to permit actual looking. The room was large and spare and very controlled. No clutter, no personal photographs. The desk was clear except for a laptop, a phone, and a single pen placed parallel to the desk's edge with the kind of precision that was either a personality trait or a message. The walls held only two things: the architectural drawings she had seen in the hallway outside, and a single painting, large, maybe 4 feet across, abstract, deep blues and grays, that moved into each other like weather over water. It was the only thing in the room that looked like it might have cost something in feeling rather than money. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He looked up. "The Han cartel." She kept her voice even. "What do they want with the Daejin files?" A beat. "That's a perceptive question," he said. "I'm an executive secretary. Being perceptive is the job." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Something adjacent to one. The ghost of an expression that suggested he had seen something unexpected. "The Daejin Infrastructure Consortium is a legitimate business," he said. "However, the municipal contracts they are pursuing, 3 of them, totaling approximately $2.4 billion in city development funds, were awarded through a procurement process that was not entirely clean. Several members of the city's infrastructure review board received payments they were not supposed to receive." He let that sit. The preliminary filing documents contained correspondence that would make those payments difficult to explain. The Han cartel has been selling that kind of leverage for years. Political protection, corporate immunity. They collect evidence of corruption the way other people collect insurance. "And Marcus knew about my archive access," Nia said slowly. "Marcus Reed has been in debt to the Han cartel for approximately 14 months, Jinwoo said. "Gambling debt, originally. He has been working it off in whatever ways they require." His voice carried no particular judgment, just facts laid flat on the table. "He knew where you worked. He understood what access you would have. He was given a task." She thought about Marcus, about the 2 years she had spent with him, the easy early months, the gradual erosion, the slow accumulation of things he said about her that she told herself she was misinterpreting. The specific quality of his cruelty, which had always been deniable, always framed as honesty, always delivered with the faint implication that she should be grateful someone was willing to say these things to her at all. She thought about his hands on her arm this morning, the way he had looked at her. Not angry, not even desperate, just transactional, like she was a problem he had been assigned to solve. "Okay," she said. Jinwoo looked at her. "Okay," she said again. "What do we do?" There was a pause, brief, maybe 2 seconds. But she caught it, the slight recalibration in his expression, as if the question had landed somewhere he hadn't expected it to. "We review what's on your laptop," he said, "and we determine exactly what Marcus was told to retrieve." They spent the next 2 hours going through it. Not Jinwoo directly. He brought in a man named Daniel Cho, who Nia would later understand was his head of corporate security, but who was introduced to her only as Daniel, a compact man in his mid-40s, with close-cropped silver-streaked hair and the specific quality of attention that suggested he had spent time in some kind of military or intelligence capacity. Daniel went through her laptop with the methodical precision of a surgeon, running programs she didn't recognize across the drive, checking access logs, mapping her archive clearance against the files she had opened in the past 3 weeks. She sat in the corner of the room, moved to a smaller chair when the doctor left, no longer the center of the procedure, and watched them work and thought about her life. This was not what she had anticipated when she applied for this position. She had applied because the salary was extraordinary, triple what she had been making at her previous job, a mid-level accounts management firm in River North, where she had spent 4 years being systematically undervalued by a succession of managers who all had variations of the same quality. They took her work seriously, and her presence less so. She had developed a reliable invisibility in professional settings, the kind that comes not from being overlooked, but from actively making yourself smaller to avoid the specific exhaustion of being noticed in the wrong ways. She was a big woman. She had always been a big woman, and she had grown up in a city and a culture and a specific family configuration that had opinions about what that meant. And at 29, she was still, in the private architecture of her self-image, engaged in a slow negotiation between who she actually was and who she had been told she should be ashamed of being. She was also, despite all of that, genuinely good at her job. The Kang Global position had felt like a test she would fail. The interview process had been rigorous and impersonal. 3 rounds, including a time document management exercise that she had been told afterward she had completed faster than any previous candidate. She had been hired on a Friday afternoon via a 2-sentence email from the HR director and had spent the weekend cycling between exhilaration and a specific variety of dread she recognized as the anticipation of eventual humiliation. Haywan's binder had not helped. It was perfect. Color-tabbed, cross-referenced, annotated with notes in a handwriting so precise it looked typeset. Nia had read it 3 times and come away with the overwhelming conviction that she was holding the record of someone who was constitutionally unlike her, who operated in a register of professional competence that was simply not native to Nia's actual personality, which tended toward warmth and humor and the occasional catastrophic bout of the kind of clumsiness that seemed targeted specifically at the worst possible moments. She had knocked over a water glass on day 4, directly onto a printed contract. The contract had been a duplicate. Nothing lost, easily replaced, but she had felt the heat of it for a week. Jinwoo had looked at the spreading water and then at her face and said nothing, not a word. He had called Jisoo, a replacement had appeared, and the meeting had resumed. The absence of comment had been, in some ways, more unnerving than anger would have been. She had no idea what he thought of her. She still didn't know. Daniel looked up from the laptop. There are 14 files in the Q3 infrastructure archive that would be relevant to what you described, he said, addressing Jinwoo. Cross-referencing against the Daejin filing sequence, 9 of them contain the correspondence flagged in the Seoul report. Were any of them accessed from an external connection in the past 90 days? No, clean log. Jinwoo nodded once. But, Daniel said, and the word carried weight, the access credentials used to open 3 of those files 2 weeks ago don't match Ms. Brooks's standard login pattern. The session duration was different. The access sequence was different. He paused. Someone else used her credentials. Nia looked up sharply. I haven't shared my login with anyone. I'm not suggesting you did. Daniel's voice was neutral, professional. Credential mirroring doesn't require the original user's cooperation. It requires access to the physical device or proximity to it for approximately 40 seconds. She thought back. She thought about the coffee shop on Wacker where she sometimes worked through lunch. She thought about the gym locker room where she had left her bag unattended for what she'd estimated at the time as about 3 minutes, but might have been longer. She thought about Marcus, who had been to her apartment twice in the 4 months since the breakup. Once to collect his things, once, 2 weeks ago, claiming he had left his spare key and needed it back. 2 weeks ago. He was in my apartment, she said slowly. Marcus. 2 weeks ago. He was there for maybe 20 minutes. Daniel and Jinwoo exchanged a look. Not long. Not theatrical. The look of 2 men who had just had a hypothesis confirmed. He cloned it, Daniel said. He had an extra copy made of everything she had accessible, Jinwoo confirmed, for her benefit. But the full archive files require in-network access, which is not available from an external connection, which is why this morning was necessary. He looked at Nia directly. They needed you inside this building, on this network, providing active credentials. Which I wasn't going to do, she said. No, he said. You weren't. And there was something in his voice, not approval exactly, but something adjacent to it, something that registered. The rest of the afternoon moved in a particular kind of controlled urgency. The kind Nia would later associate with Jinwoo's operational tempo, which was neither rushed nor slow but simply relentless, a forward movement that absorbed obstacles without stopping. Calls were made in Korean, in English, in what she thought might be Mandarin. Daniel disappeared for an hour and returned with a printed dossier that he placed on the desk without comment and which Jinwoo read in 4 minutes without expression. Jisoo appeared at the door at 3 p.m. and informed them that a representative of the Daejin Consortium had called twice to reschedule the morning's meeting. "Tell him Thursday," Jinwoo said. 2 p.m. Confirm by end of business today. Jisoo nodded and left. Nia had been quietly reorganizing the morning's canceled meeting materials, a reflex, something to do with her hands, and she paused when she noticed Jinwoo watching her from across the room. "You don't need to do that," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm doing it anyway." He watched her for another moment. Then he said, "The penthouse." "I'm sorry?" "On the 47th floor," he said. "It's a residential space. It's been unoccupied for approximately 2 years. It has a functioning kitchen, a security system tied directly to building operations, and access restricted to a list of 7 people, of which I am one." He paused. "You cannot go back to your apartment tonight." She set down the folder in her hand. "Mr. Kang, Marcus Reed knows your address. The man with him this morning does not work alone. I don't know yet how many people in the Han organization are aware of your specific location, but I know that an apartment building with standard door security and a lock that was compromised by someone with a copied key is not a place I'm comfortable sending you." His voice was even, measured, the voice of a man presenting a logical case. "This is not a personal gesture. This is a security decision." She looked at him for a long time. "I don't have any of my things," she said finally. "A list can be made. Items can be retrieved by people other than you. I have a cat." Something crossed his face, just briefly. "The cat can also be retrieved." She almost laughed. It rose in her chest unexpectedly, the absurdity of this moment. Standing in this spare, controlled, impeccably managed office, soaking wet 2 hours ago and taped and limping, having just learned that her ex-boyfriend was working for a Korean crime syndicate that had been trying to infiltrate her employer's corporate network, being told by the man himself that she and her cat could be relocated to his tower penthouse as a security measure. She didn't laugh. She pressed it back down. "Okay," she said. "Okay." The penthouse was not what she expected. She didn't know exactly what she had expected. Something austere, perhaps, something that matched the spare geometry of his office. But the space she stepped into at 6 p.m. was large and warm and very quiet, with high ceilings and deep windows looking out over the city, the rain still coming down outside. The lights of Chicago blurring through the glass like something seen underwater. There was furniture. Good furniture, heavy and comfortable, the kind that suggested the room had been properly lived in at some point. A kitchen with actual appliances, a living room with bookshelves that held actual books, a hallway leading to 2 bedrooms. It smelled faintly of cedar, the same as the office, she realized, which meant it was something intrinsic to the building, or to him, rather than a specific choice. A woman named Mrs. Park, no relation to Jisoo, arrived at 6:30 with 3 bags of clothing and toiletries and a pet carrier from which Nia's cat, a large and deeply unimpressed orange tabby named Biscuit, surveyed his new environment with the expression of someone who had been personally wronged. Nia sat down on the couch and Biscuit climbed immediately onto her lap and began to knead her thigh with the focused intensity of an animal with nowhere better to be. She sat there for a while in the quiet. Her ankle throbbed. Her palm still stung. Outside, the rain against the windows had settled into something softer, a sound like white noise, like the world insulating itself from everything inside. She thought about calling her mother. She thought about what she would say. She thought about the specific conversation she would have to have about Marcus, which she had been avoiding for 4 months because her mother had never trusted Marcus, and had said so once, and Nia had told her she was wrong, and the acknowledgement that she had not been wrong was going to require a kind of humility that felt expensive right now. She didn't call. She sat in the quiet and felt the city below her and tried to understand the shape of the thing she had walked into. She was still sitting there at 9 p.m. when a knock at the door of the penthouse made her look up. She crossed to the door and opened it. Jinwoo stood in the hallway. He had changed out of the suit. He was wearing dark slacks and a simple gray shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. which was somehow more disorienting than the suit because it removed a layer of the professional architecture she had been using to organize him in her mind. He was holding 2 containers of food from somewhere, the smell reaching her immediately, something warm and savory. He looked at her with that steady, unreadable gaze. "You haven't eaten since this morning," he said. She hadn't. She hadn't thought about it. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "You're not." He held out one of the containers. "Eat. You had a significant physical and psychological shock today. Your body needs fuel." She took the container. She stepped back from the door, and after a moment's pause, he stepped inside. They ate at the kitchen island without talking much. The food was Korean, something with beef and vegetables over rice, that was simple and precisely right in the way of food that had been chosen by someone who understood what this moment required. Biscuit came and sat on the counter between them and stared at Jinwoo with the focused, unblinking assessment of an animal taking a full measure of someone new. Jinwoo looked back at the cat. "His name is Biscuit," Naya offered. "That's a terrible name for a cat. He was orange and round when I got him. It was accurate." Something shifted in Jinwoo's expression. That ghost of an expression again, the thing that lived adjacent to amusement. He looked at Biscuit with a kind of careful neutrality, and Biscuit continued to stare at him with total sovereign confidence. "The investigation," Jinwoo said, setting down his chopsticks. "Daniel has confirmed the identity of the man with Marcus this morning. His name is Tae-Young Shin. He's been with the Han cartel for 9 years, mid-level operations. He reports directly to the cartel's logistics coordinator, a man named Hyunjae Park." He watched her face as he said this, not unkindly, but watchfully. What this means is that Marcus's approach this morning was authorized at a significant level within their organization. This was not an opportunistic move. This was a planned operation. "Which means they're not going to stop," she said. "No. Because the files are still here. The access is still here." She looked at her hands on the counter. "Because I'm still here." Yes, she absorbed this. The food was warm in her stomach, and the city was lit up behind the rain-streaked glass, and Biscuit had decided Jinwoo was acceptable and had migrated from the counter to the space beside his elbow and was now sitting with the proprietary ease of an animal who had determined that this was a good place to be. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He looked at her. "You could have sent me to a hotel," she said. "You could have assigned me a security detail and sent me home. You could have fired me and replaced me with someone who doesn't have a compromised ex-boyfriend and a complicated entanglement with a crime syndicate." She met his eyes steadily. "Why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone composing a lie, she thought. The silence of someone deciding how much of a true thing to say. "Because you didn't give them the files," he said finally. "When Marcus Reed told you what he needed and showed you what he was prepared to do to get it, you could have given him access. It would have been reasonable. It would have been survivable. Most people, faced with that choice in that moment, would have made the calculation that one morning's betrayal was worth a lifetime of not having to be afraid." He paused. "You didn't." She looked at him. "That matters to me," he said simply. The rain was quieter now. The city spread out behind the glass, all its wet and glittering distances, all its compressed and layered lives. She said, "I need you to know that I'm going to be very bad at this, at whatever this is. Being guarded, being here. I'm going to knock things over, and I'm going to be late to things, and I'm going to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and I have never in my life successfully lived in a space this clean without damaging something within 48 hours. He looked at her for a long moment. "I know," he said. "That doesn't bother you? I've lost interest in things that stay where I put them." She didn't know what to do with that. She filed it somewhere she couldn't immediately name and looked back out at the city. Biscuit had fallen asleep against Jinwoo's elbow. The traitor inside the organization had been watching them from the moment she walked in that morning. Neither of them knew it yet. The city outside the penthouse windows had gone dark by the time Jinwoo left. He didn't say goodnight. He stood, collected the empty food containers, looked once at Biscuit still sleeping against the warm space where his elbow had been, and said, "The door has a secondary deadbolt. Use it." Then he walked out, and the sound of the latch catching was the quietest thing Nia had heard all day. She sat at the kitchen island for a long time after he left. Biscuit woke up, looked at the empty space beside him, looked at Nia, and meowed once with the flat accusatory tone of an animal who felt that recent events had not been adequately explained to him. "Yeah," Nia said. "Me too." She used the secondary deadbolt. She did not sleep well. The penthouse was too quiet in the specific way of spaces that weren't hers. The radiators made sounds she didn't recognize. The city noise came through the glass at a different pitch than her Pilsen apartment. And at 2:17 in the morning, she woke up completely convinced that she had heard footsteps in the hallway outside and lay rigid in the unfamiliar bed for 11 minutes before her heartbeat came down enough to let her breathe normally. She was at her temporary desk in the corner of the executive floor's secondary office by 7:15, ankle-taped, hair controlled into a bun that conceded nothing to the previous day's disaster, a coffee from the building's fourth-floor kitchen in her hand, and a personal resolution to not be the weakest thing in the room firmly in place. Jinwoo arrived at 6:50, as he apparently always did. She knew this because Jisoo had told her during her first week, Mr. King arrives between 6:40 and 6:55, never later, occasionally earlier, and the operational tempo of the entire floor adjusts to that arrival the way a compass needle adjusts to north. He passed her desk without slowing and said, "How's the ankle?" "Fine," she said. "Don't stand on it for longer than 20 minutes without sitting down. I have 17 meetings to prep materials for." "Then prep them sitting down." He went into his office. The door didn't close completely. It rested an inch open, which she noticed because in 19 days it had always been fully closed. And she sat there for a moment looking at that inch of open space before deciding it meant nothing and returning to the morning brief. Daniel Cho arrived at 8. He came to her desk first, which was unusual. He normally went directly to Jinwoo. He set a photograph on her desk without preamble. It was a surveillance image, slightly grainy, time-stamped the previous evening at 11:40 p.m. It showed a man she didn't recognize standing on the sidewalk outside her Pilsen apartment building, looking up at the third-floor windows. "Not Marcus," Daniel said. "No." She had never seen this man before. Medium height, heavy build, a jacket that was too light for the weather. He was standing with the particular stillness of someone who was waiting rather than passing through. "Who is he?" "We're working on it." Daniel picked up the photograph. "I'm telling you because I want you to understand the level of active surveillance you're currently under. They know you didn't come home last night. This man was there for 3 hours." She absorbed this the way she had been absorbing things since yesterday morning. Not panicking, because panic required energy she had already spent, but filing it into the growing architecture of what was happening to her life and making the necessary adjustments to how she moved through the world. "Okay," she said. Daniel looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't fully read. "You're taking this very calmly." "I'm not calm. I'm functional. There's a difference." Something shifted in his face. He nodded once and went to Jinwoo's office. The morning passed in the machinery of the ordinary, or the simulation of ordinary that the executive floor had resumed, the calls and documents and preparation for the rescheduled Daejin meeting, the emails that needed responses, and the calendar conflicts that needed resolution. Nia moved through it with the focused efficiency that had gotten her hired, pushing everything else to the perimeter of her attention, keeping it peripheral. She was good at this. She had been good at this for years, keeping the hard thing in the corner of her eye while she dealt with what was directly in front of her. It was at 10:45 that she noticed the access log. She had been pulling archived documents for the Daejin meeting prep, routine, authorized, well within her clearance, when the document management system threw a small error flag on one of the files she was trying to retrieve. She had seen error flags before. They usually meant the file was already open elsewhere in the network, a simple collision of simultaneous access. She checked the active session log. The file, one of the 9 that Daniel had flagged the previous day, had been opened that morning at 9:52. From a terminal inside the building. The user ID attached to the session was a maintenance credential, a low-level access account typically used for system updates and file migrations. No maintenance updates were scheduled this week. She knew because scheduling facilities access was one of her responsibilities. She sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up her desk phone and called Daniel's cell. He answered on the second ring. She told him what she was looking at. There was a silence on the other end that lasted exactly 4 seconds, and then he said, "Don't close that window. Don't touch anything. I'm coming to you." He arrived in 90 seconds. He stood behind her and looked at the screen. His breathing didn't change. His expression didn't change. But she felt something shift in the air around him, a tightening, the kind that happened when a person who was trained to manage their reactions had something to manage. "The maintenance credential," she said carefully. "Who has access to that login?" Daniel said, "Building IT Facilities Management and the executive floor security rotation." She looked at the screen. "That's a very small group of people." "Yes," Daniel said. "It is." He took out his phone and made a call in Korean that lasted 40 seconds. When he hung up, he said, "You did the right thing calling me immediately. Say nothing to anyone else on this floor." Including Jisoo. Including anyone. He met her eyes. "Until I determine where this came from, treat every person on this floor as a potential liability." She looked at him steadily. "That's a very uncomfortable instruction to receive." "I know." He picked up his phone again. "Go back to the Daejin prep. Act normal." Act normal. She was 29 years old, living in her boss's penthouse, being surveilled by a crime syndicate, and she had just possibly discovered a mole in Kang Global's executive security structure. She went back to the Daejin prep. She was very careful to act normal. Jinwoo came out of his office at 11:30 for a brief call in the secondary conference room, and she watched him cross the floor with the particular stillness she had been cataloging since yesterday. The way he moved, the way his eyes traveled the room without appearing to, the way he spoke to Jisoo about the afternoon schedule with perfect surface normalcy, while she sat 15 feet away, knowing what Daniel had found, and watching his face for a sign that he already knew. She couldn't tell. She genuinely could not tell. This bothered her more than she expected. At noon, Daniel sent her a text on the burner phone he had given her that morning. A simple device, nothing on it except his number and Jinwoo's for communications he considered secure. The text said, "Terminal located. Reviewing footage now." She read it under the desk and deleted it. Jisoo brought lunch, something from the building's catering kitchen, delivered without ceremony, and set it on the edge of her desk with his customary minimal interaction. She thanked him. He nodded. He had the look today of someone operating at a slightly elevated level of careful, which might have meant anything or nothing. She watched him walk away. She thought about what Daniel had said. Every person on this floor. Jisoo Park had been at Kang Global for 4 years. He had excellent performance reviews, no disciplinary flags, and the kind of institutional invisibility that came from being reliably, consistently competent in a supporting role. He was the human equivalent of load-bearing infrastructure. You didn't notice it until something went wrong. She told herself she was being paranoid. She ate her lunch. At 1:15, Jinwoo came out of his office and walked directly to her desk and said, "My office," and turned and walked back in. She followed. Daniel was already there, standing near the window, and the quality of the air in the room was different, thicker, charged, the feeling of a space where something serious had recently landed and was still vibrating. Jinwoo sat behind his desk. He looked at Daniel. "Tell her," he said. Daniel said, "The terminal that accessed the flagged file this morning is located in the security station on the 41st floor. That station is staffed by the Executive Protection Rotation, 4 officers who cover the building's upper floors in shifts." He paused. The session was initiated during a period when 1 officer was on shift alone. His name is Kevin Lim. He's been with Kang Global Security for 2 years, 8 months. Naya said, "Has he been confronted?" "He called in sick at 11 this morning," Jinwoo said, after the access log was pulled. The room was quiet. "He ran," she said. "Yes." She thought about this. She thought about Kevin Lim, whose face she could not recall with any clarity. A man in a dark suit, part of the building's background furniture, one of the interchangeable elements of the security architecture she had learned to move around without really seeing. 2 years, 8 months. Someone had gotten to him, or he had gone to someone. The distinction mattered in terms of character, and didn't matter at all in terms of consequence. The maintenance credential was used to copy file metadata, Daniel said. Not the files themselves, the permission structure, the access map. It would tell someone outside the building exactly which files are restricted, what clearance they require, and which user accounts have access to them. He looked at her. Which means they know your exact clearance level. They know what you can open. And they know where those files are stored. She sat with this. They already knew, she said. They knew before Marcus came to me yesterday. Kevin Lim has been feeding them information for at least... She stopped. How long has the metadata been compromised? Daniel said, based on the access pattern, we believe the first unauthorized session was approximately 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks. She had been at Kang Global for 19 days. So they knew before I arrived, she said. They knew the archive structure, they knew what files existed, and then when I was hired and they saw what my clearance level was, She stopped again. Marcus didn't contact me after the breakup for 4 months. He showed up 2 weeks ago to return a key, a week after I was hired. She looked at Jinwoo. Did someone tell them when I was hired? Did Kevin Lim? Yes, Jinwoo said. That appears to be the timeline. She breathed through this slowly. Marcus, who she had dated for 2 years and who had told her she was too sensitive and too loud and took up too much space, and who had looked at her outside her apartment building yesterday morning, not as a person he had once loved, but as a door he needed to open. She had been a door this entire time, a means of access. The anger was very quiet when it arrived. It didn't announce itself. It settled somewhere below her sternum, low and dense and very still, the kind of anger that doesn't perform itself, that simply becomes load-bearing. Okay, she said. Her voice came out level. Kevin Lim is gone. The Han cartel knows my clearance level and the archive structure. Marcus failed to get access yesterday, which means they're going to try something else, something more direct. Yes, Jinwoo said. When? We don't know. Daniel believes we have 48 to 72 hours before they move again. They'll want to regroup after yesterday, reassess the approach. He paused. It's also possible they move sooner. Minseo Khan is not a patient man. Who is Minseo Khan? Jinwoo and Daniel exchanged a look. It was brief, a flicker, but she caught it, the weight of a decision being made about how much to say. The leader of the Han cartel, Jinwoo said. He took over from his father 8 years ago. He's 41 years old, highly educated, and significantly more ruthless than his father was. Another pause. He and I have a history. What kind of history? The kind that means this situation is not entirely about the Daejin files, Jinwoo said flatly. The files are valuable to him. The corruption leverage is useful, but disrupting my organization, exposing Kang Global to federal scrutiny, forcing me into a defensive position. He stopped. That has its own value to him. She looked at him for a long moment. So I'm not just access. I'm a weapon. He didn't look away. Yes. She nodded, filed it, moved forward. What do we do next? What they did next was spend 3 hours in a controlled, methodical audit of every access point in the executive security architecture. Daniel running the technical review. Jinwoo on the phone with people she couldn't identify in a language she couldn't follow. Naya sitting at the secondary conference room table working through the archive permission structure with the same focused efficiency she brought to everything. Because if she was going to be a weapon, she was going to understand exactly what kind and why. She found the second anomaly at 3:45. It was smaller than the first. A file request sent from the executive network to an external server, routed through 3 proxy addresses and disguised as routine automated backup traffic, that had occurred 11 days ago. The request had been for a single document, the preliminary Daejin filing, the one that contained the correspondence about the infrastructure board payments. The request had been sent from the executive floor, from the primary server hub, from a device whose network identifier she recognized. She sat very still. She pulled the device registration log and checked it against the building's master equipment inventory and sat there for a long time looking at what she was looking at, feeling the information arrive in her chest with the specific weight of something she didn't want to be true. Then she stood up and walked to Jinwoo's office and knocked. Come in. She went in. She closed the door behind her. She walked to his desk and set the printed log in front of him without saying anything and watched his face. He read it. The stillness that came over him was different from his ordinary stillness. It was the stillness of a body that had just absorbed an impact and was marshaling its resources before it allowed itself to react. The device identifier on the document request belonged to a company-issued laptop, registered to Park Seo-jin, Jinwoo's chief financial officer, his second in command. The man who had been with him for 9 years, since before Kang Global was what it was now, since the early and violent years when the company was built on things that the company's current annual reports did not reflect. Seo-jin, who Jinwoo had trusted with the financial architecture of everything he owned. Seo-jin, who is currently in the building, on this floor, 3 offices down. Jinwoo looked at the log for a long time. When he looked up, his face was very controlled, too controlled, the expression of a man who had locked something down quickly because it needed to be locked down or it would show. "Where is he now?" Jinwoo said quietly. "His office. He's been there since 2 p.m. Jinwoo stood up slowly. "Mr. Kang." Her voice came out careful, measured. "If you go in there right now, I'm aware. If you confront him right now without a strategy, without knowing how much he's already given them, without knowing what he has in place as a contingency," she stopped. "He'll run, like Kevin Lim ran, and you'll have no leverage." He looked at her. "Or," she said, "he'll have already arranged something worse than running." The quiet between them had a specific texture, taut, pressurized, the quiet of 2 people standing at the edge of something that was about to change irrevocably. She watched him wrestle with it. She watched the controlled surface hold against whatever was underneath. The discipline of a man who had spent years learning to make the strategic choice over the immediate one, who had survived long enough in the world he occupied by understanding that the satisfying response and the correct response were rarely the same thing. He sat back down. "You're right," he said. 2 words, flat and precise, that she understood cost him something. "We need Daniel," she said. "I know." She turned to go get Daniel. She was almost at the door when he said her name. Not Ms. Brooks. Her name. Nia. She stopped, turned. He was looking at her with that steady, level gaze, and there was something in it she hadn't seen before. Not warmth, not yet, but something opened, something that had not been accessible yesterday or the day before or in the 19 days before that. "Thank you," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We still don't know what he gave them." She went to get Daniel. What Park Seo-jin had given them, they learned over the next 2 hours in a controlled and devastating unraveling, was considerably more than the Daejin filing. He had given them the full organizational map of Kang Global's legitimate operations, the corporate structure, the shell company network, the financial routing architecture. He had given them the names and roles of Jinwoo's senior security personnel. He had given them the building's internal access protocols, the security rotation schedule, the emergency evacuation routes. He had been giving them things for 7 months. 7 months. Since before Nia had been hired, since before the Daejin deal had materialized, since a period in the organization's history that predated her entirely. The question of why was answered in a piece of financial documentation that Daniel surfaced from a secondary account registered in Seo-jin's wife's name. 4 payments, each significant, deposited at intervals of approximately 6 weeks. The Han cartel had not recruited Seo-jin through ideology or loyalty. They had simply found his price. Jinwoo read the documentation without expression. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, "I need 10 minutes." He went into his private office and closed the door. Nia and Daniel sat in the secondary conference room in silence. The building moved around them. Phones rang on other floors. The elevator chimed, the ordinary machinery of a corporate day running its course. And in here there was nothing but the sound of 2 people breathing and the weight of what they had just laid out on the table. 9 years, Daniel said quietly. He was looking at the financial records, but she didn't think he was seeing them. He was at Jinwoo's side for 9 years. She didn't say anything. "There's something you should understand," Daniel said, and his voice had shifted. Not harder, but lower, more deliberate, as if he was choosing each word with care. "In this organization, in the world Jinwoo operates in, trust is not a small thing. It is not a professional courtesy. It is the architecture that everything is built on." He paused. "To have that—" "I understand," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Do you?" "I spent 2 years with a man who was using me," she said. I know exactly what it feels like to have the architecture come down. Daniel was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. When Jinwoo came back out, he was composed. Completely, precisely composed in the way of a man who had taken 10 minutes to contain something that would otherwise have changed the temperature of every room he entered and had succeeded. We're not confronting Seojin tonight, he said. We are going to use what we know. We are going to give him something false, a document, a modified version of a Daejin file with specific markers embedded. When the Han cartel receives it, we will know. And we will know what else he might give them in the next 48 hours. He looked at Daniel. Can you create the document? By morning, Daniel said. Do it. He looked at Naya. The penthouse, he said. Tonight and tomorrow. Don't leave the building. I wasn't planning to. I know. Something moved in his expression. I'm saying it anyway. She went upstairs. She sat with Biscuit in the quiet of the penthouse and felt the day settle into her body the way a long, cold rain settles into ground. Slowly, deeply, in ways you don't feel entirely until you stop moving. Her phone buzzed at 9:47 p.m. A number she didn't recognize, a Chicago area code she didn't know. She answered it because Daniel had told her that the burner was secure and only 2 people had the number, and neither of them was calling from an unknown line. Naya. The voice on the other end was Marcus. Not aggressive. Not the voice she had heard yesterday outside her apartment, tight with desperation and the specific edge of a man performing menace he didn't quite own. This was something worse. This was calm. I know where you are. She said nothing. I know you found Kevin, Marcus said. I know you found the files. And I know you're going to find something else very soon. Something that's going to make everything feel very solid and contained. A pause. It's not contained. There are pieces of this you haven't found yet, and when they move, they're going to move fast, and if you're inside that building when it happens, what do you want, Marcus? I want you to walk out of there tonight, he said. Come meet me. I'll take you somewhere safe, somewhere they can't… Marcus. Her voice was very flat. You grabbed me. You tried to put me in a car. You used me as a key to a door you wanted to open. She felt the low, dense anger below her sternum. Still there, still quiet, still load-bearing. Whatever you're selling right now, I'm not buying it. Nia, listen to me. Don't call this number again. She ended the call. She sat in the dark for a moment. Then she called Daniel. He answered immediately. What happened? She told him. His silence on the other end was the same 4-second silence as before, the silence of a man processing something and deciding what it meant. He said there are pieces we haven't found, she said. He said when they move, they'll move fast. He was trying to get me out of the building. Or he was trying to confirm you're still in it, Daniel said. She hadn't considered that. Either way, Daniel said, don't open that door to anyone tonight. Anyone. I'm posting additional security on 47 starting now. Okay. And Nia, his voice was careful. What he said about pieces we haven't found. He may be right. She sat with the phone in her hand after he hung up and listened to the city outside the glass and thought about the shape of things she couldn't see yet. The pieces moving in the dark towards something she couldn't fully map from where she was standing. She thought about Seojin, 3 floors down, eating dinner in his office perhaps, or going home to his wife and the account registered in her name, carrying the weight of 7 months of choices and not yet knowing that the weight was about to… The document Daniel created was elegant in its deception. He worked through the night and had it finished by 4:17 a.m. A modified version of the Daejin preliminary filing, structurally identical to the real document, carrying the same file metadata, the same formatting signatures, the same embedded corporate headers that would make it indistinguishable to anyone who wasn't the person who had originally drafted it. But buried inside the financial correspondence tables, in a routing number that appeared in a single footnote on page 31, was a sequence that didn't exist in any real account anywhere in the world. A marker. A fingerprint pressed into the paper of a false document, invisible until it moved. Daniel called it a canary. When the Han cartel received it, when they tried to use that routing number for anything, verification, leverage, extraction, a flag would trip in a monitoring system Daniel had set up on a private server, and they would know that Seojin had delivered the package. The plan was clean. The plan was controlled. The plan was exactly the kind of methodical, patient operation that Jinwoo ran best, the kind that used an enemy's momentum against them, that let them believe they were winning while the ground was being removed from beneath their feet. Nia understood all of this by 6 a.m., when Daniel briefed her in the penthouse kitchen over coffee, while Biscuit circled his ankles with the demanding persistence of an animal who had decided that Daniel was an acceptable food source. "When does Seo-jin get the document?" she asked. "It will be in his email by 8, Daniel said, routed through the normal archive distribution system. He'll see it as a routine filing update. And if he doesn't pass it along, then we've lost nothing. We continue watching him." Daniel's voice was level, clinical. "But he will. He's been consistent for 7 months. He'll pass it within 24 hours. She looked at her coffee. "And then we have proof." "Then we have proof." She nodded. She thought about Seo-jin, about 9 years, about the specific quality of betrayal that came not from an enemy, but from someone who had been inside the walls, who knew the architecture because he had helped build it, who understood exactly which load-bearing elements to remove and in what order. She thought about Marcus saying there are pieces you haven't found yet. She thought about that all morning. Seo-jin arrived at 8:20. She watched him cross the executive floor from her desk. A compact man in his mid-40s, silver at the temples. A face that had the quality of someone who had spent years in professional environments where expression was a liability. He had always been pleasant to her in the distant, formal way of senior executives who acknowledged support staff without really registering them. This morning he said, "Good morning, Miss Brooks," without breaking stride, and she said, "Good morning," back, and watched him go into his office and close the door, and felt the knowledge of what she knew sit in her chest like a stone. She did her job. She prepped the Daejin meeting materials for Thursday. She handled 3 calls for Jinwoo's calendar. She drafted correspondence for Jisoo to review. She did all of it with the focused, surface-normal competence of someone who had decided that performing ordinary was the most useful thing she could do right now, and she did it well enough that by mid-morning, the floor felt almost like itself again. The ambient hum of a corporate day in motion, the ordinary weight of work. At 11:14, Daniel sent a single word to her burner phone. Delivered. The canary was in Seo-jin's outbox. She deleted the message, replaced her phone in her desk drawer, and went back to the Daejin brief. Jinwoo came out of his office at noon and walked past her desk and said very quietly, without looking at her, "Conference room B, 10 minutes. She gave it 12, then followed. The secondary conference room was the smaller of the two on the executive floor. No windows, a table that seated 6, walls that were insulated against sound in a way that the building's original architectural plans listed as acoustic optimization for sensitive meetings, and which served a purpose that had nothing to do with acoustics. Daniel was already there. Jinwoo stood at the head of the table. "The canary has been accessed," Daniel said the moment she closed the door. "Not forwarded yet." Seo-jin opened the document at 9:52, accessed the footnote tables at 10:07, closed it at 10:14. "He was checking it," Jinwoo said, "verifying the content against what he was told to look for." Daniel nodded. "Which means he received specific instructions about what the document should contain. He's not acting independently. He has a handler, someone who told him exactly what to pull and when." Nia said, "Have you identified the handler?" "Not yet. The communication is encrypted. We're working on the routing." "How long?" "Hours? Maybe longer." She thought about Marcus's phone call, the calm voice, the too specific knowledge of what they had found and what they were about to find, the attempt to get her out of the building, whether to use her or to remove her from the one place she was currently protected, or both. "There's something else," she said. Both men looked at her. "Marcus knew about Kevin Lim," she said. "He knew we'd found him. He mentioned it specifically. I know you found Kevin. That means someone told him. After we identified Kevin Lim at..." She checked the mental timeline. "Approximately noon yesterday, someone in our communication chain passed that information out." The room was quiet. Daniel said carefully, "Our communication chain yesterday was myself, Mr. Kang, and you." "I know," she said. No one said anything for a moment. "I'm not suggesting either of you," she said. "I'm suggesting that our communications are not as secure as we believed. Either someone is monitoring internal traffic in a way we haven't identified yet, or..." She stopped. Or Seojin has access to more than we've mapped, Jinwoo said. Or Seojin has access to more than we've mapped, she confirmed. Jinwoo looked at Daniel. Daniel's jaw tightened fractionally. I'll run a full sweep of internal communications infrastructure. If there's a secondary intercept point, I'll find it. How long? Jinwoo said. 4 hours, maybe 3. 3. Daniel left. Nia stood across the table from Jinwoo in the insulated quiet of the conference room. He was looking at the door Daniel had just gone through, and she watched his profile, the controlled, precise geometry of a face that kept its own counsel, and thought about the cost of being the kind of person he was. The specific loneliness of operating in a world where trust was a structural element, and every structural element was a potential failure point. I'm sorry, she said. He looked at her. About Seojin, she said. 9 years is a long time. Something moved across his face. Fast and then gone. Yes, he said. That was all. She nodded. She turned to leave. Nia, she stopped. Stay close today, he said. Not an order. Something slightly different. The texture of a request from someone who didn't make them often. I'm not going anywhere, she said. She meant it as straightforward fact. She understood from the way he looked at her for a half-second longer than necessary that he had heard something in it she hadn't entirely planned to put there. She went back to her desk. Daniel's sweep took 2 hours and 40 minutes, and what he found was worse than a secondary intercept point. He came to her desk at 2:50 and said, very quietly, I need you to come with me right now. Do not bring your phone. Do not stop to tell anyone where you're going. She stood up immediately. She left her phone on the desk. He took her to the server room on the 36th floor, a space she had never been in, cooled to a temperature that hit her like a wall when the door opened, full of the white noise hum of equipment in rows. He led her to a terminal at the far end, brought up a screen, and showed her what he had found. It wasn't a secondary intercept point. It was a complete parallel monitoring system, a shadow network running beneath Kang Global's official infrastructure, feeding a real-time stream of internal communications, document access logs, personnel movement data, and security camera footage to an external server. It had been installed 14 months ago. The installation required extended physical access to the server room, administrative credentials, a level of technical sophistication that did not belong to Kevin Lim or to Park Seo-jin, who was a financial executive, not an engineer. Who installed this? She said. Daniel's face was very still. The installation signature matches the credentials of Kang Global's head of IT infrastructure. Who is James Yoon? He's been with the company for 6 years. He resigned 2 weeks ago. Daniel paused. 3 days before you were hired. She absorbed this. James Yoon built this system, she said. He spent 14 months feeding everything, every internal communication, every document access, every movement in this building, to the Han cartel. And then he left. She looked at Daniel. He left because his job was done, because they had everything they needed. Except your archive access, Daniel said. Except my archive access, she repeated, which is why Marcus came for me, which is why they needed me active, in the building, with my credentials. She stopped. The shape of it was becoming clear, not in pieces anymore. The whole thing, at once, sudden and complete. This isn't about the Daejin files, she said. Daniel said nothing. The Daejin files are leverage, yes, they're useful, they'll protect the Han cartel from prosecution, they'll give them control over politicians. But the Daejin files are the reason they gave Marcus to get me compliant. They're the surface reason. She was talking faster now, following the logic as it unfolded. The real target is the full Kang Global archive, the complete internal network, everything James Yoon spent 14 months mapping. She looked at Daniel. With my access credentials and the architecture Yoon built, someone outside this building could access not just the Daejin files, but everything, every contract, every financial record, every communication Jinwoo has ever sent from inside this network. Everything that would expose not just Kang Global's legitimate operations, Daniel said quietly, but its other ones. The air in the server room was very cold. Does Jinwoo know this? She said. He's about to. They went upstairs. Jinwoo listened to Daniel's summary without interrupting. He stood at his window with his back to the room, The same posture as the first morning, the morning she had come in soaked and late and bleeding. And when Daniel finished, the silence went on long enough that Nia counted 8 seconds of it before Jinwoo turned around. His face was controlled. Precisely. Terribly controlled. Seojin knew about Yoon, he said. It wasn't a question. Almost certainly, Daniel said. He may not have known the full scope, but he would have known a monitoring system existed. He's been feeding document intelligence to the cartel while Yoon's system fed them operational intelligence. 2 parallel pipelines. 2 years, Jinwoo said. Yoon was inside this building for 6 years. Seojin for 9. The breach is... It's not contained to what we identified yesterday. No, Daniel said. It's not. Jinwoo looked at Nia. The Canary document. When Seojin forwards it, the Han cartel will know it's a fake, she said, following his thought, because Yoon's system will have already shown them the real document. They'll compare the two and know we're on to Seojin, which means the moment Seojin forwards the Canary, they'll move, Jinwoo said. The word landed in the room and sat there. Not in 48 to 72 hours. Not in measured, predictable time. The moment Seojin forwarded that document, the Han cartel would understand that their inside access had been identified, that the window was closing, and they would do what organizations like that always did when a window started closing. They would stop being patient and start being fast. Pull the Canary, Jinwoo said immediately. Can you? It's already been forwarded, Daniel said. The quiet that followed was a different kind of quiet. Daniel's phone buzzed. He looked at it. The monitoring flag just tripped. Seojin forwarded the document at... He checked the screen. 2:58 p.m. 8 minutes ago, while they had been in this room. Jinwoo moved first. He went to his desk, picked up his phone, made a call in Korean that lasted 30 seconds, and when he hung up, his face had changed. Not broken, not cracked, but shifted into something harder and more forward-facing, the expression of a man who had stopped processing and started operating. Building security to full lockdown protocol, he said to Daniel. I want every external access point secured. The loading docks, the maintenance corridors, the parking structure connections, everything. Done, Daniel said, already on his phone. Seojin does not leave this building. If he attempts to access the elevators or stairwells, I want to know immediately. Done. And James Yoon's? I have a last known address, Daniel said, but if the cartel is moving, he'll have been pulled to a safe location already. Jinwoo nodded. He looked at Nia. She was standing in the center of the room, and she was calm. Not the performed calm of someone managing panic, but the particular calm that comes from having moved past fear into the clear, cold space on the other side of it, where the only useful thing left is what you decide to do next. The archive, she said. If Yoon's system has been feeding them internal data for 14 months, they have a map of this entire network. They know where the files are, they know the access structure, and they know my credentials can open it. The only thing standing between them and a complete extraction of Kang Global's internal records is the fact that my access requires physical presence, my laptop, my login, my fingerprint on the biometric panel. She looked at him steadily. Which means coming into this building is the next logical step, not a targeted grab, a full incursion. Yes, Jinwoo said. When? Tonight, he said. If I were Min Seo-kan and I understood that my inside access had been identified and the window was closing, I would move tonight. The floor shuddered. Not metaphorically, not as an expression of narrative tension. The floor actually shuddered, a deep concussive vibration that traveled up through the carpet and into the soles of Nia's feet, followed immediately by the sound of something large and structural happening somewhere below them. Daniel's phone rang. He answered it, listened for 4 seconds, and said to Jinwoo, Explosion. Parking structure, sub-level 2. Vehicle-based device. A distraction, Jinwoo said immediately, or an access point. The maintenance corridors from sub-level 2 connect to the building's east service elevator, Daniel said, which opens on 37. 37. 1 floor below the server room, 1 floor below where they were standing 30 minutes ago. They were watching the building, Nia said. They saw us go to 36. They know we found Yoon's system. She said it without emotion, just the fact of it, placed on the table. They moved the timeline up, Jinwoo said. He looked at Daniel. How many men do we have in the building right now? 12 on active rotation. 6 more I can pull from the perimeter. 18 against whatever comes through that service elevator. Jinwoo's voice was flat. Seal floor 37, now. Daniel was already moving, already talking into his earpiece, already doing 3 things simultaneously with the compressed efficiency of someone who had trained for exactly this scenario and was measuring everything against the speed of what was coming. The building's emergency alarm activated. Not a fire alarm, something lower and more insistent. A security frequency she hadn't heard before. And the lights on the executive floor shifted subtly, something in the overhead system adjusting to an emergency power mode. Jisoo appeared in the doorway of the conference room, his face stripped of its usual professional neutrality. Mr. Kang, the elevator banks on 40 through 43 are offline. Security is directing all non-essential personnel to the "Get everyone who isn't security off this floor," Jinwoo said. "Now, use the northwest stairwell." Jisoo went. In the sudden quiet that followed in the office that was now emptying of its ordinary human furniture, the administrative staff, the junior coordinators, the infrastructure of a normal corporate day evacuating through a fire stairwell in an orderly, controlled panic, Nia and Jinwoo stood across from each other, and the reality of the moment came into full resolution. The plan was gone. The canary, the controlled operation, the measured 48 to 72-hour window of strategic patience, all of it was gone, dissolved in the vibration of an explosion 2 floors below a server room that had been monitored and mapped and understood by people who had spent 14 months learning the interior geography of this building. There was no strategy left. There was only the building and the people inside it, and whatever was coming through the East Service elevator on floor 37. Jinwoo opened the locked cabinet behind his desk. He removed 2 handguns and a phone she had never seen, a different device, matte black, that he tucked into his jacket. And then he turned and looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not fear. He didn't have fear exactly. Or if he did, it lived somewhere so deep and so managed that its surface expression was indistinguishable from something else. It was closer to fury. Contained, absolute, and very, very quiet. The emergency tunnel, he said. She had read about it. Haewon's binder, page 47, a single paragraph under emergency evacuation protocols. In the event of a full building security failure, the executive floor is equipped with a direct evacuation route to an underground access point connecting to the adjacent block. Access panel is located in the northwest utility corridor behind the secondary kitchen. She had read it as a formality, the kind of protocol you documented and never used. "I know where it is," she said. He looked at her, a look that was brief and complete, that saw her clearly in the way she was only beginning to understand he sometimes saw her, and said, "Stay behind me." She wanted to say she wasn't going to be dead weight in a stairwell. She wanted to say she had been handling herself since 6:15 yesterday morning, and she was still here, still standing, still thinking clearly while people around her were running. She wanted to say a number of things. She said, "Okay." They moved. The northwest utility corridor was behind a door that looked like a wall panel, flush with the surface, no visible handle, opened by pressing a specific point in the upper left corner, which Jinwoo found without hesitation in the dim emergency lighting. The corridor beyond was narrow and utilitarian, concrete block walls and exposed pipe, a single strip of LED lighting running along the ceiling. They were halfway down it when Daniel's voice came through Jinwoo's earpiece. She could hear it from 2 feet away, the sound compressed and urgent, saying words she couldn't fully make out, and she watched Jinwoo's face as he listened, watched something shift in it, watched the controlled surface absorb something and immediately recalibrate. He stopped walking. She stopped with him. "Say that again," he said into the earpiece. The corridor was very quiet. The building above them felt distant now, its alarm a low-frequency vibration in the walls. She watched his face. She watched it absorb what Daniel was saying word by word, sentence by sentence, with the specific quality of a person receiving information that does not land cleanly because it does not fit any existing category in their understanding of the world. He ended the call. He stood in the narrow utility corridor with the LED lighting casting everything in flat white, and he was very still. "What?" she said. He turned and looked at her, and she understood immediately, from the particular quality of his stillness and the thing that had happened to his eyes, that what Daniel had just told him was not another piece of the existing catastrophe. It was a different catastrophe entirely. Seojin didn't forward the canary to the Han cartel, he said. She stared at him. Daniel said the monitoring flag tripped because the document was forwarded to a federal server. His voice was careful, measuring itself. An FBI task force server, a unit assigned to organized crime operations in the Midwest. He paused. Seojin has been working with federal investigators for 7 months. He was not feeding the Han cartel. He was feeding the FBI. The corridor was very, very quiet. She heard the building above them. She heard her own breathing. The Han cartel's moved tonight, she said slowly. The explosion in the parking structure. The men coming through the service elevator. Were authorized, Jinwoo said, or anticipated, or both. His jaw tightened. The FBI has been building a case against both the Han cartel and Kang Global simultaneously. Seojin gave them the financial architecture of everything I own, every account, every transaction, every shell company. He looked at her with the expression of a man standing on ground that has just proven to be something other than ground. The operation tonight isn't just the Han cartel moving against us. It's a coordinated takedown, she said. Of everyone, he said. Han cartel, Kang Global, the corrupt officials connected to the Daejin deal, everyone in the network taken simultaneously before anyone can destroy evidence or run. He paused. Which means the men coming through that service elevator may not all be Han cartel soldiers. She understood. The full shape of it, finally, completely. Some of them were going to be federal agents, and Jinwoo, standing in an emergency evacuation tunnel beneath his own building with 2 handguns and a secondary phone, was about to. Jinwoo stopped moving. That was the first thing. He stopped mid-stride in the utility corridor and stood absolutely still for 3 full seconds, and Nia watched him do the thing she had seen him do twice before. Take something enormous and compress it into a manageable shape, force it into the architecture of his operational mind where it could be used rather than felt. 3 seconds. Then he said, "Give me your hand." She gave him her hand. Not because she was afraid, not because she needed steadying, but because the request was so stripped of everything. No preamble, no explanation, just the direct and unadorned need of one person for contact with another in a moment when the world had just reorganized itself entirely. That refusing it would have been a kind of cruelty. His hand was warm and dry. His grip was firm without being hard. He held it for exactly 4 seconds. Then he let go and started moving again. "The tunnel exits on Wabash," he said. "There's a vehicle staged in the parking structure on the north side. Daniel has the keys." "Daniel," she said, keeping pace behind him. "Does Daniel know about the FBI component?" "Not yet." "Is Daniel—" "Clean," Jinwoo said flatly. "Daniel has been with me for 14 years. If Daniel were compromised, I would be dead already, and we both know it." She accepted this. The tunnel sloped downward for approximately 40 meters before leveling out into a longer straight passage, the ceiling dropping slightly, the LED strips above them flickering once and then steadying. The air was cool and tasted faintly of concrete dust and something older, the specific underground smell of a city built in layers over itself across a century and a half. Her ankle was telling her things she didn't want to hear. The compression sleeve was doing its job, but the job had limits, and running, even at the measured pace Jinwoo was setting, was not what a sprained ankle with a possible partial ligament tear was designed to do 40 hours after injury. She breathed through it. She kept moving. Jinwoo's secondary phone buzzed. He looked at the screen without slowing. "Han cartel," he said. 12 men confirmed entering through the East Service corridor. Building security has contained them on 37. A pause. 3 men down on our side. 3 men down. She absorbed this. Real people, whose names she might not know, whose faces she had seen in hallways and elevator banks and the lobby of Kang Tower, whose job had been to stand between the building and whatever came at it. "FBI," she said. 2 units, one at the building's main entrance. One. He stopped. Looked at the screen again. Something changed in his face. Positioned at the Wabash exit. They both stopped walking. The tunnel stretched ahead of them, 40 more meters to the exit panel, to Wabash, to the staged vehicle that was now positioned between 2 federal agents and an organized crime takedown that had been 14 months in the construction. Secondary exit, Naya said immediately. There isn't one. There has to be. Building like this, tunnel like this, fire code requires... The secondary exit is a maintenance hatch that opens onto the basement level of the building next door, Jinwoo said. It requires a physical key that is kept in the executive floor utility cabinet, which they had left behind. She breathed. Options, she said. Go back through the building, he said it evenly. Through 39 levels of an active security incident involving the Han cartel and federal agents simultaneously. Or go forward and walk into a federal arrest. Yes. She looked at the tunnel. She looked at him. If you're arrested tonight, she said carefully, with the full financial architecture of your organization already in federal hands, with Seojin's testimony, with 14 months of operational data from Yoon's monitoring system. I know. Jinwoo. She used his name the way he had used hers. Stripped, direct, the way you spoke to someone when everything else had been removed. If you walk into that arrest tonight, you don't walk out. His jaw tightened. I know. Then we go back. The Han cartel has 12 men contained on 37, she said. Contained, which means Daniel's 16 people have the advantage of position. We go back up, we reach Daniel, and we... She stopped. The next sentence was forming itself from pieces she hadn't fully assembled yet. We use what we have. He looked at her. The files, she said. The encrypted files from the archive, the full Daejin correspondence, the bribery records, the corruption documentation. Not just the Daejin filing, everything. She was thinking fast, the words coming out slightly ahead of the complete thought. Seojin gave the FBI Kang Global's financial architecture, which means they have evidence against your organization. But the Daejin files, the corruption evidence, the officials, the judges, the infrastructure board payments, that's evidence the FBI wants badly enough that they've been building a 14-month case to get near it. She met his eyes. What if we gave it to them directly? Not through Seojin, not through a monitored network. Directly. On our terms, with conditions, with the kind of cooperation agreement that changes the terms of whatever they're planning to do tonight. He stared at her. You'd be giving up leverage, he said. You'd be giving up leverage to avoid a federal indictment that ends everything, she said. It's not a great trade, it's just the better one. In the narrow corridor in the flat white light, with the city above them full of armed men and federal agents, and the collapsing architecture of everything he had built, Jinwoo Kang looked at Nia Brooks with an expression she had no existing category for. You have access to the full archive, he said slowly. Yes. If you uploaded the complete corruption file set to a federal evidence server, not the FBI's organized crime unit, not the unit that's already compromised this operation, but directly to the U.S. Attorney's Office, it would land in hands that the Han cartel doesn't own, hands that are not part of the existing investigation. He was thinking out loud now, following the same thread she had started. It would create a competing interest, the U.S. Attorney's Office receiving evidence of political and judicial corruption, while simultaneously the FBI moves on an organized crime case. Those two things create institutional friction, jurisdictional conflict. And in that friction, there's space to negotiate, she said. There's space to negotiate, he confirmed. He looked at her for one more second. Then, how fast can you access the archive? From my laptop. 3 minutes to pull the relevant files, 2 to package them, 1 more to upload if the building's network is still stable. The network is on emergency backup power, but it's stable. Daniel made sure of that in the first 30 seconds of lockdown. He was already turning back the way they had come. Can you do it from the penthouse? Yes. Then we go up. They went up. Going back through the building was not the same as coming down had been. Coming down had been controlled urgency. Jinwoo setting a measured pace, the tunnel empty and sealed, the threat known and directional. Going back up meant the northwest stairwell, the emergency lighting strobing slightly between backup power cycles, the distant sounds of the building in crisis, voices through walls, the crackle of security radios, somewhere below them a concussive sound that might have been a door being breached, or might have been something structural, or might have been something she didn't want to think about specifically. Her ankle screamed at her on the first landing. She didn't slow down. Jinwoo moved ahead of her and she followed, and the stairwell went up and up in its gray concrete repetition, and she focused on the next step, the step after, the breath in and the breath out, the simple and available physics of continuing to move. They hit floor 42 when the stairwell door below them slammed open. Jinwoo pulled her flat against the wall in one motion, his arm across her chest, her back against the concrete, the shock of the movement absorbed in about a quarter of a second. Below them, footsteps. Heavy, fast, not trying to be quiet. The footsteps of people who believed they had control of the space they were moving through. Two voices. Korean. Short exchanges. Jinwoo's hand tightened briefly against her arm. Then he pointed up. Keep going. And she moved. They both moved. The footsteps below growing louder as whoever it was came up the stairs and then abruptly stopping. A door opening and closing on 41. The sound cutting off. They kept going. 47. The penthouse door. Jinwoo went through first, checked the space in the practiced 3-second sweep of someone who had been trained to clear rooms, and then she was inside and the door was locked behind them, and Biscuit appeared from the bedroom with the affronted dignity of an animal who had been alone for too long and was prepared to make this everyone's problem. She was already at the coffee table, already pulling her laptop out of the bag she had never really unpacked. 2 minutes, she said. You said 3. I was being honest earlier. Now I'm being fast. She heard him make a sound. Not quite a laugh. Not quite, not a laugh. And then he was on his secondary phone talking to Daniel in rapid Korean while she opened the archive portal, entered her credentials, hit the biometric panel on the laptop's edge with her thumb, and was in. The full archive. 97,000 documents. 14 years of Kong Global's operational history, legal and otherwise. The Daejin filing, the infrastructure board correspondence, the payment records, the names, judges, aldermen, a state senator, 2 members of the city's development authority, and the amounts, and the dates, and the encrypted communication chains that connected them all to the Han cartel's political protection apparatus. She found the package. She knew exactly where it was because she had been prepping the Daejin meeting materials for 2 days, and she had touched these files more than anyone in the company except the people who created them. She pulled it. She packaged it. 1 minute, 40 seconds. Daniel says the Han cartel team on 37 has been contained, Jinwoo said from behind her. 2 of their men are down. The rest have retreated to the service corridor. Building security is holding the line. FBI? Still at the Wabash exit, and now at the main entrance. They haven't breached the lobby yet. They're waiting for something. Waiting for the Han cartel to do the hard work first, she said, fingers moving across the keyboard. Let them fight their way through building security, then walk in after. Yes. Efficient. Yes. The U.S. Attorney's Office maintained a public-facing evidence submission portal, a legacy system from a whistleblower protection initiative 3 years prior, secure, encrypted, direct to the prosecutorial side of the federal structure rather than the investigative side. She had looked it up once 6 months ago for a research project that had nothing to do with this, and the memory of it arrived now with the specific clarity of a detail that had been waiting to be useful. She found it. She opened the upload interface. She paused for a fraction of a second. If I send this, she said, there's no retrieving it. Everything in this package, the Han cartel's political protection network, the corrupt officials, the Daejin payments, it all goes to prosecutors who will use it. She kept her eyes on the screen. And some of it is going to connect back to Kang Global's involvement in the Daejin deal. I know, Jinwoo said. I mean specifically, she said. There's correspondence in here that implicates Kang Global in the procurement irregularities, not as the bribe payers, as the beneficiaries. She turned and looked at him. You knew the procurement process was compromised when you entered the Daejin negotiations. He met her eyes. Yes, he said. I needed to hear you say it. I know. She turned back to the screen. Cooperation agreement, she said. If this lands in the U.S. Attorney's Office and they see the scope of what you're voluntarily handing them, the full cartel political network, the judges, the senator, they have reason to negotiate your exposure in the Daejin matter rather than prosecute it alongside everything else. She paused. It's not immunity. It's leverage of a different kind. I understand what it is, he said. His voice was very quiet. Send it, She sent it. The upload took 47 seconds. She watched the progress bar and breathed and did not look away from the screen until the confirmation appeared. A case reference number, a timestamp, a system-generated acknowledgement that the submission had been received and encrypted into the prosecutorial evidence queue. She exhaled. Then Jinwoo's secondary phone rang. He answered it. He listened. His face changed. "Where?" he said. He listened again. He said, "Hold your position. Do not engage." He hung up and looked at her, and the expression on his face was the one she had been dreading since the corridor. The one that meant the shape of things had changed again. "Minseo-kan," he said. "He's in the building." She stared. The containment on 37 was a diversion. The 12 men through the service elevator. They were meant to draw Daniel's security team to 37 and hold them there. He was moving as he spoke, crossing to the penthouse door. Minseok came in through the parking structure explosion site, a different entry point while everyone was looking at the service corridor. How many men with him? Daniel doesn't know yet. Where is he now? Jinwoo looked at her. He's coming up, he said. The penthouse was on 47, the top floor. The only floor above it was the roof garden. There was nowhere to go up. The FBI, she started, are 6 floors below us and have no reason to move quickly upward when their primary targets are all theoretically on 37 and below. He checked the gun in his jacket, a single, compact motion. By the time they understand what's happening up here, Minseok will already be on this floor. She felt the cold of it move through her. Not fear exactly. Something more precise. The sensation of a situation narrowing to a single point, all options collapsing into one moment, and what you chose to do in it. Why? She said. Why is he coming here himself? He has soldiers for this. Because this was never just about the files. Jinwoo's voice was flat, the flatness of old knowledge, of something that had been true for a long time and was now arriving at its moment. Minseo-kan and I have been in conflict for 8 years. The Daejin deal, the political connections, the corporate influence. I was building something that would eventually have made Kang Global untouchable in this city, in this region. He understood that. The files are valuable. Destroying what I've built is personal. 8 years. She thought about the weight of 8 years of conflict condensed into a man riding an elevator upward in a locked-down building while federal agents staged in the lobby and a crime war played out 3 floors below. She thought about what it meant to want something badly enough to come for it yourself. Daniel is coming up, Jinwoo said. He'll be here in 4 minutes. And Minseok? 2, maybe less. 2 minutes versus 4 minutes. She looked around this penthouse, the space she had slept in, badly, but slept in. The kitchen where she had eaten with him in the quiet. The window where the city spread out 47 floors below, all its lit and layered distances, all its ordinary lives continuing in complete indifference to what was happening up here. Biscuit was on the couch, watching them both with round, serious eyes. Get in the bedroom, Jinwoo said. Lock the door. The secondary window has a... No, she said. He looked at her. I am not getting in the bedroom, she said. I'm the reason he's here. My access, my credentials. I'm the reason all of this escalated to the point where Minseo-kan decided to come up here himself. She met his eyes. I'm not hiding in a room while you... Nia, I sent that evidence package, she said. It's already in the U.S. Attorney's system. The case reference number is on my laptop. If anything happens to me, if anything happens to you, that evidence exists and it cannot be retrieved. She kept her voice level and steady. That changes what Minseo can achieve tonight. He can hurt us, but he cannot unsend what I sent. He cannot take back the information that's already in federal hands. She paused. If he knows that, he doesn't, Jinwoo said. Then we tell him. The silence between them was very short. The elevator at the end of the penthouse corridor chimed. The doors opened. Minseo-kan was not what she had imagined. She had constructed a silhouette from the pieces she'd been given. Ruthless, patient, personal in his violence, the kind of man who built systems of corruption the way architects built buildings and guarded them with the same possessive fury. She had imagined something harder and more deliberately frightening. The man who walked out of that elevator was 41 years old, slightly under 6 feet, wearing a dark coat over a suit, and he moved through the penthouse corridor with the unhurried confidence of someone who had decided the outcome of this situation before he arrived. He had 2 men behind him. Only 2, which told her something about how certain he was of the numbers. He stopped when he saw Naya standing in the center of the room. Not Jinwoo, her. He looked at her with the specific assessing attention of someone cataloging a variable they hadn't expected to encounter in this configuration, and she looked back at him and did not move. "Ms. Brooks," he said. His English was precise, barely accented. "I had hoped you would be less central to this than you've turned out to be." "Funny," she said. "I had hoped the same thing." His attention moved to Jinwoo. Something shifted between the 2 men. A current, old and charged, the specific frequency of people who have been in opposition long enough that the opposition has become its own kind of relationship. "Jinwoo," Min Seok said. "Min Seok." Jinwoo's voice was very even. "You came yourself." "Some things require personal attention." "The FBI is in this building," Jinwoo said. 6 floors below us. "And engaged with your security team on 37, Min Seok said, "which gives us approximately—" He checked his watch with the casual precision of a man who had timed this, 9 minutes before their attention moves upward. 9 minutes, Jinwoo said. "To do what exactly?" Min Seok looked at Nia. "To retrieve what she has access to, and to ensure that the question of Kang Global's future in this city is resolved tonight, in a way that is not subject to future renegotiation." "The files," Nia said. Min Seok looked at her again. "Your laptop, your credentials, the full archive." "Already sent," she said. A pause. Fractional. She felt Jinwoo go very still beside her. "I'm sorry?" Min Seok said. "The full corruption file set. The Daejin correspondence, the infrastructure board payments, the political protection network, everything connected to your organization's bribery apparatus. It was uploaded to the U.S. Attorney's evidence system 9 minutes ago." She kept her voice completely flat. "I have the case reference number on my laptop, which you're welcome to look at. The submission is in the prosecutorial queue. It cannot be retrieved, modified, or suppressed because it went directly to prosecutors rather than to the investigative unit your organization has relationships with." Min Seok looked at her. The quality of his attention had changed. The unhurried confidence was still there. It didn't evaporate. It was too practiced for that. But something beneath it had shifted, the way ice shifts when the temperature changes. The surface holds, but the structure underneath is doing something different. "You're bluffing," he said. "Look at the laptop," she said. "It's on the coffee table. The submission confirmation is on the screen." He didn't look at the laptop. He kept looking at her. "Even if that's true," he said slowly, "the evidence implicates Kang Global as well. You've handed federal prosecutors a case against your own employer." "Yes," she said, "that's not leverage. That's destruction. It's negotiation," she said, "with the only currency I had left." She held his gaze. "You came here tonight to take something and ensure that Kang Global couldn't survive what was coming. What was coming is already here, and it landed in hands you don't own, which means what you came here for is gone." She paused. "The question you have 9 minutes, actually 8 now, to answer is what you do next." Min Seok looked at Nia Brooks with the careful recalibrating attention of a man who had come to this room expecting a door and found instead a— Min Seok looked at Nia Brooks with the careful recalibrating attention of a man who had come to this room expecting a door and found instead a wall. The silence stretched for 4 seconds. Then he moved, not toward the laptop, not toward Naya. He turned to the man on his left and said something in Korean, short and hard, and the man reached into his jacket and Jinwoo was already moving, crossing the distance between them in 3 strides with the compressed velocity of someone who had been calculating that exact movement since the elevator doors opened, and his shoulder hit the man's arm before the gun came fully clear of the holster. They went down together against the wall. The second man moved toward Naya. She did not wait for him. She picked up the laptop from the coffee table. Solid aluminum, 3 pounds, the accumulated weight of everything she had spent 2 days protecting, and she swung it. The edge caught him across the cheekbone. It was not graceful. It was not skilled. It was the raw, committed violence of someone who had run out of room to negotiate and understood that the only remaining currency was force. The man stumbled sideways, hit the edge of the kitchen counter, and went down on one knee. She stepped back and put the coffee table between them and stood there breathing hard, the laptop still in her hand. Biscuit from the couch issued a sound that was not quite a hiss and not quite a yowl, something ancient and feline and deeply disapproving of the entire situation. Minseok had not moved during any of this. He stood in the center of the room and watched Jinwoo pin his man against the floor and watched his second operative recover from Nia's swing and press one hand to his bleeding cheek and looked at all of it with the expression of someone completing a calculation they had started some time ago. "Enough," he said. Not loud. The word just landed, flat and final, a door closing. Both his men stopped. Jinwoo stayed where he was, one knee on the downed man's back, the man's gun now in his hand, pointed at the floor. "The evidence is sent," Minseok said. He said it the way a person says something they have decided to accept because accepting it is the only path that preserves anything. "The U.S. attorney has it." He looked at the laptop in Nia's hand, at the confirmation still visible on the screen, the case reference number, the timestamp, the irreversible record of what she had done. "You're right that I can't retrieve it." "No?" she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not entirely steady, but her voice was. "What you've sent will bring down the political network," Minseok said. "The infrastructure board, the judges, the city officials." He paused. "My organization's protection apparatus in this city is finished." "Yes," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Not with hostility, exactly, with something more complicated. The look of a man who has encountered a variable that exceeded his model's parameters and is deciding what that means about the model. "You work for him," Minseok said. "You've been working for him for what?" 3 weeks. 21 days, she said. "And you sent evidence that implicates him as well." "I sent evidence that gives prosecutors a reason to negotiate," she said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" It wasn't quite a question. "I did it because it was the right thing to do," she said. "Not for him, not for you. Because those officials took money to corrupt a public process, and the people who should have been protected by that process got nothing, and that is a simple wrong that I had the means to address." She held his gaze. "That's all." Minseo Khan looked at Nia Brooks, and she looked back at him. And for a moment the room was very quiet. The sounds of the building, the distant activity of floors below them, the city pressing against the glass. All of it peripheral to this specific silence. "You're not what I expected," he said. "I know," she said. "Nobody ever expects me." The elevator at the end of the corridor chimed. Daniel Cho came through the door with 4 security personnel behind him, and behind them, their jackets marked in large white letters, 2 federal agents who had apparently decided that 9 minutes was enough time and had come upstairs to resolve whatever was happening. What happened next took a long time, even though each individual piece of it was fast. Minseok did not resist. He stood with the specific stillness of a man who had already done the math and understood that resistance at this point was a cost with no return. He placed his hands at his sides and looked at the federal agents and said his own name clearly and completely when asked. And his 2 men were separated and restrained with the efficient impersonality of people doing a job they had done many times before. Jinwoo stood up from the floor. He handed the confiscated gun to Daniel without looking at it. He straightened his jacket. He looked like a man who had been in a fight. His collar pulled wrong, a small cut along his jawline that had begun to bleed in a thin, dark line. But he was composed, that terrible, precise composure that she had been watching for 3 days and had come to understand was not the absence of feeling, but its management. One of the federal agents, a woman in her 40s, short, gray-streaked hair, the specific manner of someone who had been doing this long enough to have stopped performing authority and simply carried it, looked at Nia with a measuring, careful attention. "You submitted the evidence package," the agent said. It wasn't quite a question. "Yes," Nia said. "From this building, tonight." "Yes." The agent looked at her for another moment, then at Jinwoo, then back at Nia. "We're going to need a statement." "I know," Nia said. "You'll get one. You'll get..." The next 4 hours were the particular exhaustion of legal process, agents and questions, and a room in the building's conference level that had been converted into a temporary command point, the ordinary furniture of a corporate space now occupied by people in federal jackets and men from the building's security team. And in one corner, Park Seo-jin, who sat with his hands folded on the table and looked at Jinwoo when Jinwoo was brought in and held that look for a long moment before looking away. Nia saw it happen. She was across the room and she saw Jinwoo's face when he saw Seo-jin, and she watched him make the same choice she had seen him make in the utility corridor: absorb it, compress it, keep moving. And she thought about what that kind of discipline cost across the duration of a life. The accumulated weight of things continually pressed down rather than released. She gave her statement. All of it. Marcus, the parking lot outside her apartment, the bruises, the archive access, the laptop credentials, Kevin Lim, James Yoon's monitoring system, the Canary document, the phone call from Marcus the previous evening, the tunnel, the upload. She gave it in sequence and with precision, and the taking agent wrote everything down and asked clarifying questions, and Nia answered them all. At one point, the agent said, "You made the decision to submit the evidence without Mr. Kang's authorization." "I made it with his authorization," Nia said. "He told me to send it." "After you presented it as the viable option." "Yes." The agent wrote something. "Miss Brooks, the evidence you submitted is going to be central to a significant federal prosecution. Your role in this, it doesn't fit the standard categories we use." "I know," Nia said. "I was just the secretary." The agent looked at her. "That was a joke," Nia said. The agent did not appear to find it a joke. Minseo Khan was taken from the building at 2:14 a.m. in a vehicle that moved without lights and siren through the cleared street outside. The specific discretion of a federal operation that had decided the public dimension of this arrest could wait until morning. His two men went in a separate vehicle. Kevin Lim, located at an address in Evanston, was taken into custody at approximately the same time by a separate unit. James Yoon, the IT architect, the man who had built the Shadow Network over 14 months, was found at an airport hotel near O'Hare, a bag packed, a flight booked, and was arrested while eating room service pasta in a way that Nia found, when she heard about it later, oddly humanizing. Park Seo-jin was the last to leave the building. Before he did, he was brought to the room where Jinwoo was sitting, still composing himself, still maintaining that surface. His jacket folded on the table beside him, the cut on his jawline cleaned and covered with a small, adhesive strip by a federal medic who had done it with the same impersonality as everything else. The federal agent stepped outside and left the two of them alone for 3 minutes. Nia was in the hallway. She did not intend to listen. She was close enough to hear anyway. Seo-jin said, "I'm sorry." Just that. 2 words, direct and unqualified, the way an apology sounds when the person making it has stopped managing it and just let it be what it is. Jinwoo said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Why?" Seo-jin said, "Because I was afraid of what we were building. Because I watched us build it, and I watched where it was going, and I didn't know how to stop it from inside." A pause. "I should have come to you, I know that. I chose the wrong door." Another long silence. "The FBI approached me," Seo-jin said, 7 months ago. They had enough already to charge me with financial fraud. The shell company worked from 2019. They offered me a way out." His voice was quiet and very tired. "I took it." "You could have told me," Jinwoo said. "I know. You didn't trust me with it." "I didn't trust myself," Seo-jin said. "I didn't trust that if I came to you I would go through with it, that you wouldn't, that I wouldn't let you talk me back." A breath. "You're very persuasive, Jinwoo. You always have been. That's the problem." The silence after this was different, heavier. The specific weight of 2 people sitting with the full cost of 9 years and what had been built in them and what had been broken. "Go," Jinwoo said finally. Seo-jin left. Nia moved back from the doorway before he came out, but she felt him pass in the corridor. The diminished gravity of a person who had set something down that had been very heavy and didn't yet know if they felt lighter or emptier. She went into the room. Jinwoo was sitting at the table with his jacket beside him and his hands flat on the surface, looking at nothing. She sat down across from him. She didn't say anything. He said, "He wasn't wrong." She waited. About what we were building, he said. About where it was going. He looked at his hands. I have spent 11 years constructing something that was never going to end cleanly. I knew that. I made a series of choices that moved me further and further from any clean ending, and I made each one with full understanding of what I was doing. He paused. That's not an excuse. It's not self-pity. It's just the fact of it. I know, she said. He looked up at her. You submitted evidence that's going to cost me significantly. Yes. The Daejin deal is finished. The shell company structure is compromised. The U.S. Attorney's Office is going to open a parallel investigation into Kang Global's financial architecture, and the cooperation I can offer in the Han cartel prosecution will reduce my exposure, but it will not eliminate it. I know, she said again. You did it anyway. You told me to. I told you to because you were right, he said. Which means you were right about something that was going to hurt me significantly, and you said it clearly and directly and without softening it or managing my response to it. He looked at her steadily. Most people don't do that with me. I've noticed, she said. It's a problem. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. She said, What happens now? The U.S. Attorney's Office will open negotiations, he said. Daniel is already in contact with a criminal defense attorney. The cooperation agreement for the Han cartel prosecution will be the primary leverage. He paused. It will take time. It will cost money. Some of what I built will have to come apart, and some of what comes apart will not be rebuilt. But you stay out of prison, she said. Probably, he said. Not certainly, probably. She absorbed this. Probably was a significant improvement over where they had been standing in a utility corridor 3 hours ago, when the trajectory was pointed somewhere considerably darker. Marcus, she said. He was taken into custody an hour ago, Jinwoo said. The charges are significant. The attack on you, his role in the Han cartel operation, the credential theft. He will not be available to concern you for a considerable period. She nodded. She thought about Marcus. She tried to feel something specific about it, satisfaction, relief, the particular closure of a threat resolved, and found instead that what she felt was a kind of quiet that had nothing to do with Marcus specifically. A quiet that had been building since yesterday morning, since before the run in the rain, since somewhere earlier and deeper than any of this. The quiet of something being finished, of a way of living that had been organized around being afraid of the wrong things for a long time, finally running out of road. I need to call my mother, she said. The corner of his mouth moved again. Now? Not right this second, but soon. She looked at her hands. She's going to have opinions about all of this. I imagine so. She never trusted Marcus. She told me once, and I told her she was wrong. She wasn't. No. She looked up at him. She'll have opinions about you too, for what it's worth. I expect that, he said. I'll face them. There was something in the way he said it. Not casual, not dismissive, but direct and without flinching, the tone of someone who intended exactly what they said and was not performing intention, that settled into her chest somewhere below the accumulated exhaustion of everything. She said, You called me by my name in the corridor. The first time was 2 nights ago, in the penthouse. You said thank you. He looked at her. I noticed, she said. I filed it. I'm telling you now because... She stopped. Because what? Because she was 29 years old and had spent 2 years with a man who had looked at her and seen a door. And here was this improbable, complicated, deeply compromised person who had looked at her and seen something that had made him cancel meetings and call doctors and make decisions about trust he hadn't made in years. And she was tired and her ankle hurt, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning and she was done managing what she felt about it. Because I noticed, and I think you should know I noticed. Jinwoo Kang looked at Nia Brooks across the width of a conference table in a building that was still humming with the aftermath of federal agents and crime syndicate soldiers and a night that had taken everything they had. And he said, I know you noticed. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. They sat in the quiet for a while longer. Outside, through the building's high windows, Chicago was beginning to lighten at its eastern edge. The specific gray-blue of a city before dawn, before the commuters and the noise and the ordinary machinery of a day starting up again. 6 months moved through the city the way seasons move through a place that has seen enough of them. Not gently, but with the specific indifference of time that doesn't require your permission. The Han cartel prosecution became the largest organized crime case in the Northern District of Illinois in 11 years. Min Seo Khan was indicted on 47 counts, including racketeering, bribery of public officials, conspiracy, and 3 counts of attempted murder. The attempted murder charges stemming, in part, from the events of a single night in a tower on Michigan Avenue. His attorney entered not guilty pleas to everything and began the slow, expensive process of fighting charges built on evidence that had been submitted directly to prosecutors by a woman who had been an executive secretary for 21 days. The political dimension of the case, the infrastructure board members, the state senator, the 2 development authority officials whose names appeared in the correspondence Nia had packaged and submitted, became its own parallel proceeding. The U.S. Attorney held a press conference in which he described the evidence as among the most comprehensive documentation of municipal corruption his office had encountered, and he did not mention how it had arrived in his evidence queue. And Nia watched the press conference on her laptop in her new office on the 39th floor and thought about page 31 of a false document, a routing number that didn't exist, and the specific elegance of a well-laid trap. Kang Global's cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors was negotiated over 11 weeks. Jinwoo's attorney, a woman named Constance Park, who operated with a precision that reminded Nia faintly of Haewon's organizational binder, and who charged fees that made Nia's eyes go briefly wide when she saw the invoices, structured the agreement around the evidence submission, the building security operation, and Jinwoo's direct role in the apprehension of Min Seo Khan. The outcome was significant but not devastating: a substantial financial penalty, a court-ordered restructuring of the shell company network, and a 5-year monitored compliance agreement that would be administered by a federal oversight office staffed by people who would become, over time, familiar presences in the Kang Global building. The Daejin deal was dead. The infrastructure contracts went back through a new procurement process that was, this time, conducted without the specific irregularities that had made the original correspondence worth dying for. 3 other firms won the contracts. Kang Global's legitimate commercial real estate and corporate development divisions continued without them. Daniel Cho's role in the operation was reviewed and cleared. He received a commendation from the building's board of directors that he accepted with the same expression he brought to most things: careful, professional, not quite warm, but not cold either. He also, without comment or ceremony, arranged for Nia's laptop to be replaced with a new model that had a better biometric panel because the aluminum edge of the old one had been noticeably dented on one corner. He never mentioned why. Park Seo-jin's cooperation testimony was central to both the Han cartel prosecution and the resolution of Kang Global's compliance agreement. He received a reduced sentence on the financial fraud charges, 18 months, of which he would serve 12. On the day he surrendered to the federal correctional facility, he left a handwritten letter on Jinwoo's desk. Nia was the one who found it and placed it unopened on the corner of the desk. And she never asked what it said, and Jinwoo never told her. And in the geometry of what they had become to each other, that felt correct. Kevin Lim pled guilty to corporate espionage and breach of fiduciary duty and received a sentence that felt both adequate and somehow beside the point. James Yoon contested his charges for 8 months before his attorney advised him that the digital forensic evidence was, in the attorney's careful professional language, overwhelming, and he entered a plea agreement in the 9th month and was sentenced in the 10th. Marcus Reed pled guilty to aggravated assault, criminal harassment, and conspiracy in connection with the Han cartel's corporate infiltration operation. At his sentencing, Nia did not attend. She had given her statement. She had given everything the legal process required of her. She did not need to be in a room watching it conclude. Her mother called the day after the sentencing to tell her she was proud of her. There was a pause in the conversation, and then her mother said, "I never trusted Marcus." "I know, Mom," Nia said. "I told you. I know. You never listened to me. I know." Another pause, then carefully, "This man you work for. He's—" Nia stopped, considered. "He's complicated. Most interesting people are," her mother said, with the specific tone of a woman who had been watching her daughter make choices for 29 years and had decided that this particular choice, whatever it was was at least more interesting than the last one. Nia became Chief Operations Director on a Thursday in early spring, 7 months after the night everything came apart and was rebuilt into something different. The title came with an office, a real one, not a temporary desk in a corner, on the 39th floor, 2 floors below the executive level, with windows that faced east over the lake and a door that she could close. She knocked things over in it regularly. A plant, twice. A coffee mug that left a permanent ring on the edge of the credenza that she chose not to sand out because it felt honest. A framed photograph of the Chicago skyline that fell off the wall during a video call because she had not trusted the mounting properly, and which she rehung afterward with the grim determination of someone refusing to let an inanimate object win. Jisoo brought her coffee every morning at 7:15 and had developed, over the months, the specific and affectionate exasperation of someone who had accepted that their workplace was going to be permanently more chaotic than they preferred and had decided this was tolerable. The work was real and it was hard, and she was good at it in the ways that mattered. The structural understanding, the operational thinking, the capacity to see what was coming before it arrived, and to name it clearly without managing the room's response to it. She had always been good at these things. It had taken a night in an emergency evacuation tunnel and a face-off with a crime syndicate's leadership and a piece of evidence uploaded from a penthouse at 11:47 p.m. to establish it in a context where people paid attention. She thought about that sometimes. The particular cost of proving yourself, the specific exhaustion of having to be tested at that pitch before the proof counted. She thought about it, and she kept working. The night of the charity gala was in late spring, a Thursday. The sky over the city holding on to its light until nearly 9 because of the season, the long Midwestern twilight that felt like the day refusing to let go. The event was in the building's grand ballroom, Kang Global's annual community development benefit, now in its 4th year, now operating with the additional weight of a company that had publicly and verifiably restructured itself away from the things it used to be. It went well. It went the way things go when people have worked hard on them, and the work has been done correctly. Not perfectly, because nothing goes perfectly, but solidly and with integrity, and the people in the room felt that and responded to it. At the end of the evening, when the last guests had departed, and the catering staff were moving through the space with the quiet efficiency of reset, Nia took the service elevator up rather than the main bank, because the main bank had a line, and her shoes were not designed for standing in lines, and she had been on her feet since 4 p.m. The service elevator opened on 46. She took the staircase, one flight, her ankle long since healed, the compression sleeve a memory, to 47 and through the penthouse level and out through the north door to the rooftop garden, because she had discovered the rooftop garden in her first week of living in the building and had never entirely left it behind even after she had moved back to Pilsen, to her own apartment, to her own space, and her own life organized the way she wanted it. The city was laid out below her in all its accumulated, glittering, indifferent grandeur. The lake dark and vast to the east, the grid of streets lit amber and white in every direction, the specific density of a city at night that was not quiet even in its quietest moments, that carried its noise the way a person carries their history, inescapably, as part of what they were. Jinwoo was there. He was standing at the garden's north edge, no jacket, his hands in his pockets, looking out over the city with the stillness she had stopped reading as coldness months ago. He had been at the gala all evening, working the room with the controlled social fluency of someone who had learned exactly how much of himself to show in a crowd and had calibrated it down to the fraction. And she had seen him across the space several times, and they had moved in the same orbit without quite intersecting, the way you did at events, the way you did when you were both doing your job. He turned when he heard her step. "The gala went well," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Yes." The table for the community housing initiative raised 3 times the projected amount. "I heard." Jisoo is extremely pleased. Jisoo is always extremely pleased when numbers exceed projections. It is his primary source of visible emotion. She almost laughed, came out as a breath, warm in the evening air. They stood looking at the city for a moment. "Constance finalized the compliance structure last week," he said. "The oversight office begins formal operations in June." "I know. I drafted the operational integration protocol. It was thorough. It was supposed to be." He reached into his jacket pocket. He removed something small, held it without showing her for a moment, his hand closed around it. Then he opened his hand. The ring was not large. It was not the elaborate declaration of something designed to make a statement about wealth or power. It was a slim band of white gold set with a single diamond, not enormous, not tiny, chosen with the specific care of something that was about the person receiving it rather than the person giving it. And engraved on the inner surface of the band, small enough that you had to look for it, was a shape she recognized. A paperclip. The exact silhouette of the small silver clip that had been on the lanyard of the temporary secretary badge she had worn on her first day, before her permanent credentials had cleared, before she had become part of the architecture of this place. She had worn it clipped to the pocket of her blazer, and she had lost it sometime in the second week, and she had assumed it was simply gone, dissolved into the ordinary attrition of small things. She stared at it. "I found it on the floor of the secondary conference room," Jinwoo said. "On day 14, I kept it." He said this without apology or explanation, in the direct, unmanaged way he sometimes said things that cost him something, that came out of a place he didn't normally let visible. "I don't know exactly when I understood why. I kept it anyway." She looked at the ring in his palm. She looked at his face. He said, "I am not the same person I was before that night. Some of what I was has been dismantled, and some of it I dismantled myself because I understood it needed to go. What remains—" He stopped, chose the next words carefully. "What remains, I would like to build differently. I would like to build it with someone who tells me when I'm wrong before I've finished being wrong, who sends the evidence even when it costs her, who names the thing clearly and then stays in the room." She looked at him. "That's me," she said. "Yes," he said. "That's you." She had spent years being told she was too much, too big, too clumsy, too warm, too loud, too willing to feel things that the room had decided were inconvenient. She had spent years making herself smaller in spaces that didn't know what to do with the size of her actual self. And she had gotten very good at the compression, and the compression had cost her things she was only now understanding the full scope of. She took the ring from his hand. She looked at it. The diamond caught the city's light and held it, not dramatically, not like a scene from something designed to be beautiful, but steadily, the way real things hold light, without performance. "If I say yes," she said, "I need you to understand that I'm going to knock things over in your life on a regular basis. I'm aware. I'm not going to stop being clumsy. I know. And I'm never going to stop telling you when you're wrong. That's why I'm asking," he said. She looked at the ring in her hand. She looked at the city below them, the city she had grown up in and run through in the rain and almost lost herself in and found herself in that order, across the span of 3 days that had rearranged everything. She looked at Jinwoo Kang, the shadow king of Chicago's underworld, now the CEO of a legitimately restructured corporation with a federal compliance officer and a permanent ring in his jacket pocket, who had once crouched on his own carpet to put ice on her ankle and had kept a lost paperclip for 7 months without knowing exactly why. She put the ring on. He looked at her hand. He looked at her face. The expression he wore was not the controlled, composed surface she had learned to read through. It was something underneath, something unmanaged, unarchitected, simply present in the way a person's face is present when they have stopped deciding what it should look like. She had waited 29 years to be seen that clearly. She thought it was about the right amount of time. Below them, Chicago continued its indifferent, luminous, complicated existence. Traffic moved on Michigan Avenue. A boat crossed the dark surface of the lake. Somewhere in the city, the ordinary machinery of lives continued. People arriving home, people leaving, people making choices in the middle of nights that would rearrange everything or change nothing, unable to tell the difference until later. Nia Brooks stood on the roof of Kang Tower with her ring on her finger and the city beneath her feet, and the specific quietness of a woman who had stopped waiting for permission to take up the space she had always been entitled to. Her kindness had not been weakness. It had been precision, the exact and necessary tool for a world that had too many people willing to be hard and not enough willing to stay soft in the places that required it. Her size had not been a flaw. It was simply her, complete and entire, and the people who had told her otherwise had been wrong in the specific and boring way that small thinking is always wrong. Her clumsiness was, and would always be, genuinely a problem in professional settings. This was simply true. She had made peace with it. Jinwoo put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, and they stood in the quiet of the rooftop garden with the city spread out below them, and neither of them said anything for a long time. They didn't need to. The story was already told in the shape of what remained, in the ring and the paperclip, in the building below them that was something different now than it had been, in the two people standing on its roof who were something different now than they had been, built new from everything that had come apart and everything that had held. The city glittered, the night held, fade out,